Download now.
Hello and a very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kabir Naqvi. You're watching this special broadcast focused on what's happening inside Gaza. We're continuing with our rolling coverage here on the 8th day of the Israel-Gaza war. But this time around, focus on what's happening inside Gaza. Stories of resilience in the face of shortage of fuel, shortage of food, and a shortage of hope as well. In the latest developments that we're bringing to you, tens of thousands of people in Gaza have been forced to move to the southern part of the Gaza Strip, to seek refuge following Israel's evacuation warning. The Israel Defense Forces conducted localized raids in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, this coming in from the Palestinian Health Ministry. Around 2,200 Palestinians have been killed and another 9,800 have been wounded. But on day 8, these are the latest updates. The death toll has risen over the 3,200 mark. The Defense Forces have conducted localized raids in Gaza with the ground invasion looming. It could be in a couple of hours, couple of days. We don't know. Hamas has told the people of the Gaza Strip to ignore these evacuation orders, even as thousands of people have taken up their belongings, their stuff, their vehicles, and they have started moving towards the southern part of the Gaza Strip, ladies and gentlemen. Visuals from inside the Gaza Strip that now looks like an apocalyptic ruins. Desperation amidst darkness, if one would have to summarize what's really happening in Gaza. Now the Israel military on Saturday, which is the October 14th, released a latest aerial footage which it says was targets that said to be used by Hamas terrorist group were being destroyed during the airstrikes. Take a look at that. These are some of those airstrikes where Hamas operatives and the buildings that they used and utilized were attacked. Now, in the black and white video that was released by the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, facilities were being struck by fighter jets, and many news agencies were not able to independently verify that particular footage, but the IDF made a statement in their Telegram channel claiming that dozens Nukba terrorist operatives and the head of Hamas's aerial system were killed during a wide-scale strike over the Gaza Strip on Friday night, the intervening night of yesterday and today, even as you're looking at the 8th day of constant bombardment that's taking place inside Gaza. More than 1 million Palestinians in northern Gaza faced an Israeli deadline to flee to the south. And Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, said that Israel had only just begun to retaliate for the weeks' Hamas's rampage across southern Israel. But even as you're looking at all these visuals, let me take you to the streets of Gaza, streets of Ramallah, streets of Khan Yunis. Take a look what's happening over there. The streets of Gaza City look like desolated ruins with abandoned cars, scattered debris, destroyed buildings, you name it, with facades completely broken. Israel's military has called for civilians to relocate to the south within 24 hours. That deadline, ladies and gentlemen, has been completed. People are still moving towards the south part of the Gaza Strip, even as a ground invasion looms. Now, blasts from airstrikes, they continued. You can look at the smoke billowing on the Gaza skyline. They continue to ring out over the city of more than 1 million people, and dark plumes of smoke rose across the skyline. Israeli warplanes continued pounding Gaza. All of this in retaliation for the weekend attacks by Hamas terrorists that has killed many, many people. The bombardment of the Gaza Strip, which is home to 2.3 million people, many call it an open-air prison, has left now almost 2,000 Palestinians dead. The Israeli military said it would operate significantly in the Gaza city in the coming days, and civilians would only be able to return when another announcement was made. Now, Israel has vowed to annihilate the Hamas's terrorist group, which led the attacks on October 7th, just a week back. And why it's important that we talk about the humanitarian crisis as well. Because you've got rescue teams, you've got paramedics on the ground, hospitals are working, they've been hit because of the periphery of a shelling. All of this must be put out for people to consume. Take a look at this. Paramedics that were at work, rescue team that was at work in Gaza Strip, which was hit by an Israeli airstrike. Some of those visuals have now come across. Now, Israeli airstrike, they hit areas where paramedics and the rescue teams were operating. All those paramedics were rushed to the hospital. The rescue teams, all those hit and injured in the rescue teams were rushed to the hospital. Already, people are having to go this tumultuous task of pulling and rescuing their survivors from underneath the destroyed buildings, the rubble of these destroyed buildings. And these teams itself, the collective teams themselves get attacked because of Israeli airstrikes. But there you have it. The moment when the Israeli airstrike hit the area where paramedics, the firefighters, the rescue teams were operating. This in the Gaza Strip.
اطلع بسرعة اطلع على السيارة مين اللي يجي هاي نفس الدار يا عمي اطلع بقول لك تطلع فيا لك يا مين شو بالعباد شو بالعباد
Well, now residents of Khan Yunis, another place in Gaza Strip, searched through the rubble of a building that was destroyed by an Israeli airstrike this very morning. Israeli weapons hit a 4-floor building in Khan Yunis, killing and wounding several people. Bodies were recovered from the rubble and taken away on stretchers. Take a look.
بالواقف انا عقبالك كله
Now, more than 1 million Palestinians in northern Gaza faced an Israeli deadline to flee to the south. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already said that Israel had not only just begun to retaliate for last week's Hamas rampage across southern Israel. Now, Israel has since put the Hamas-run Gaza Strip, which is home to 2.3 million Palestinians, under a total siege and has bombarded it with unprecedented airstrikes. Take a look at some of those ruins. Its rescue operations after rescue operations. And what's worse is that these paramedics and rescue workers are themselves being hit in Israeli airstrikes. The Gaza authorities say that 1,900 people have died.
بالواقف انا عقبالك كله.
And even as that deadline approaches its finishing time, dozens of cars were seen leaving Khan Yunis. Take a look. After Israel's instructions to the residents of Khan Yunis to flee to the south, Israel's military called for all civilians of Gaza City, more than 1 million people. I'm again reiterating, 1 million people. How is it possible for 1 million people to suddenly move to the south, to relocate to the southern part of the Gaza Strip within 24 hours? As the Israeli forces are amassing their tanks for an expected ground invasion, which is going to be in response to the devastating attack by the terrorist group Hamas. Now, the United Nations said evacuating everyone was near impossible, with power supplies cut and food and water in the Palestinian enclave running short just after a week of retaliatory airstrikes and a full Israeli blockade. These are thousands of cars that can be seen leaving Khan Yunis towards the southern half of the Gaza Strip. But now Palestinians in southern and central areas of the enclave, where people were expected to flee to, said that airstrikes had hit there overnight, with the central parts that were also hit on Friday morning. There was no immediate comment coming across from Israel's defense forces. Meanwhile, the United Nations Humanitarian Office, the OCHA, said that more than 4 lakh people had fled their homes in Gaza, and 23 aid workers had also been killed, even as the mass displacement continues in Gaza. Now, we just saw several thousands of Gaza residents that could be seen on roads, plying their cars, heading out of the northern part towards the southern part of the Gaza Strip after Israel ordered more than 1 million people to leave within a span of 24 hours. For more, watch this Reuters report.
Carrying mattresses and personal belongings, residents of Gaza City were seen walking south on Friday after Israel ordered more than 1 million people to leave the northern half of the Gaza Strip within 24 hours. Israel said troops backed by tanks had carried out raids inside the Gaza Strip Friday. That was its first announcement of a shift from an air war to ground operations in order to root out Hamas fighters a week after their deadly rampage in southern Israel. Hamas, which controls the densely populated area, told Gaza residents to stay put despite Israel's deadline. Mosques broadcast the message, "Hold on to your homes, hold on to your land." While many residents said they would not go, several thousand people could be seen on roads heading out of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, but it was impossible to tell their exact numbers. The United Nations said Israel's call for Gaza civilians, over 1 million of them, to leave was impossible to carry out, quote, without devastating humanitarian consequences. Here's UN spokesman Rolando Gomez.
The United Nations strongly appeals for any such order to be rescinded, avoiding what could transform what is already a tragic situation into a calamitous situation.
Israel rebuked the UN statement, saying it should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Since Hamas fighters burst across the barrier fence and killed 1,300 Israelis on Saturday, Israel has responded with the most intensive airstrikes of its 75-year conflict with the Palestinians. Gaza authorities say 1,800 people have been killed. The United Nations says 400,000 people have already been made homeless.
Well, meanwhile, a Gazan boy tended to his pet bird at a shelter after his family fled their home in Gaza City. Now, this bird was one of the few possessions that 13-year-old Azmi Diab took with him when the family fled to a UNRWA, a United Nations Refugee Agency, one of those administered schools, which is to the west of Khan Yunis. This 13-year-old boy and his pet bird are the only few possessions that he has. He says, I found this bird when it was small and he raised it himself. And he brought a nest for it to hide it so that it wouldn't die from the frequent shelling. He says that he loves his little pet. But at the same time, the boy also has a mature reaction to give.
Frankly, the situation is dire. Life has become difficult. I have left education and left my belongings. I don't know anything about my friends, whether they have been martyred or if they are still alive. Life has become hard. There is no electricity, no internet, and I can't communicate with my friends. I have left my belongings and education at home. We were forced out of our homes. I left barefoot and ran while I was very scared because the rockets were being launched, and I am terrified because they were very powerful.
Desperation amongst darkness. That's the the word that is coming out from that little boy's story. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Forces, they have confirmed that they did carry out a localized raid over the past 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. Now, this came ahead of an anticipated ground offensive in the war-hit region of Gaza. A statement from the IDF stated that over the past 24 hours, Israeli military forces carried out localized raids inside the territory of the Gaza Strip to complete the effort to cleanse the area of terrorists and weaponry. Now, during these operations, there was also an effort to locate missing people. The hostage situation that is also being looked at very closely. Now, it's important to note that Hamas has taken several Israeli forces hostage and is using them to deter Israeli attacks on Gaza. Despite this, Israeli forces have continued their operations to respond to the Palestinian terrorist organization Hamas. This was another attempt made by the Israeli forces to rescue the hostages. This war was initiated by Hamas, and today marks a week since an unprecedented assault was launched on the people of southern Israel after Hamas fired thousands of rockets into the Israeli territory, sparking an unprovoked conflict. And since then, Israel has launched numerous counteroffensives. We're looking at those visuals. Gaza turned into an apocalyptic ruin. The counteroffensives in Gaza has led to many Hamas terrorists seeking shelter, many of them killed. The Hamas terrorists have carried out brutal attacks against the people of Israel, sparing not even the youngest of the children. On the other hand, several children and women that were killed as collateral in the Israeli airstrikes. Well, now the Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip on Friday since the Hamas fighters rampaged through southern Israel. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a campaign of retaliation had only just begun.
אנחנו הולמים באויבינו בעוצמה חסרת תקדים.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was, quote, striking at our enemies with unprecedented might on Friday, and emphasized that, quote, this is just the beginning. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip Friday and vowed to annihilate Hamas after its fighters stormed through towns and villages in southern Israel last week, killing 1,300 Israelis, mainly civilians, and making off with scores of hostages. Netanyahu added, "Our enemies have only begun paying the price, and I won't detail what is yet to come." So far, troops backed by tanks have mounted raids to attack Palestinian rocket crews and sought information about the location of hostages, according to an Israeli military spokesperson. This follows airstrikes that Gaza authorities say killed nearly 2,000 people. On Friday, Israel gave more than 1 million residents of the northern half of Gaza 24 hours to flee to the south to avoid an onslaught. Hamas vowed to fight to the last drop of blood and told residents to stay.
The situation in Gaza has reached a dangerous new low.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of a disaster if so many people were forced to flee, and said the siege of the enclave should be lifted to let in aid.
We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules.
Earlier, a UN spokesperson said it would be impossible for Gazans to obey Israel's relocation order without devastating humanitarian consequences. Israel responded that the UN should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Tens of thousands are estimated to have fled south in Gaza after the notice to evacuate, the UN said Friday. Gaza authorities said 70 people were killed and 200 were wounded when Israel struck cars and trucks carrying people fleeing. Reuters could not independently verify the reported incident.
Now, meanwhile, in a bid to quell the ongoing hostilities, the Israeli Defense Forces have intensified their strikes on Hamas terror groups, the targets within the Gaza Strip, notably Nukba terrorist operatives identified as key players in the recent infiltration into Israel were among those targeted in a staging ground. The IDF also conducted wide-scale strikes. Take a look at some of these black and white visuals with thermal imaging that show exactly the locations that were hit by the Israeli forces. Now, the IDF conducted wide-scale strikes on operational headquarters used by Hamas, where aerial activities were coordinated, and in a major development, Mirad Abu Mirad, who headed the Hamas's aerial system, was killed during these particular strikes. So as the situation unfolds, the IDF maintains its commitment to defending Israel against the Hamas terrorist organization, and Hamas's aerial command chief has been killed in this strike. Key Hamas operative Murad Abu Murad has been killed in these IDF strikes. But that's not all. In another development, IDF aircraft operating under the intelligence guidance of Shin Bet and Aman successfully targeted and eliminated Ali Kachi. Now, Ali Kachi is the commander of the Najaba force within the Hamas terrorist organization. Kachi had been a central figure behind a recent terrorist attack in the communities surrounding Gaza. So not just one, two key operatives that have been killed due to the strikes by the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, notably, Kachi's history includes an arrest in 2005 following the kidnapping and murder of Israelis, and he was subsequently released as part of the Gilad Shalit deal. Now, the latest details underscore the ongoing dynamics in the Israel-Gaza conflict, even when we're looking at these new fresh airstrikes that were carried out today. The paramedics were also hit, but at the same time, two key operatives of the Hamas terrorist organization, their aerial command chief and another key operative, Ali Kachi, have been killed in today's Israeli Defense Forces airstrikes, ladies and gentlemen. But we've spoken about what's happening inside Gaza. We know that Israel is at war with Gaza. We also know that Israel's got a two-front war with the Hezbollah and Lebanon up in the north. But you also have the West Bank area, another area that has seen escalated tensions over the last couple of years. Palestinian youth clashed with the Israeli military near Ramallah on Friday, hurling stones, flipping cars and setting tires on fire to block roads. This is the West Bank area, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look at some of these shots. Israeli security forces killed many Palestinians and wounded dozens in confrontations across the West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry has come out and said in a statement All of this because people started marching in solidarity with Gaza. Now, by Friday afternoon, by yesterday, Palestinian fighters were still engaged in gunfights with Israeli soldiers in different areas of the Palestinian territory where the Palestinian Authority exercises limited self-rule. This coming across from the West Bank area. Well, for a better Palestinian perspective, my colleague Neha Khanna spoke to Bushra Khalidi, who is the Palestinian policy lead at Oxfam, and asked her about the situation in Gaza. Listen into this excerpt.
We are now joined by Bushra Khalidi. She is a Palestinian woman. She works as policy lead at Oxfam, and she joins us live now from the West Bank. Bushra, this is a very difficult time for the people of Israel as well as for the Palestinians. Thank you very much for joining us at a time like this. If you could begin by telling us what the situation is like where you are in the West Bank. Are things relatively normal there? And then if you could give us a sense of how devastating the last few days of airstrikes have been in Gaza. I believe many of your colleagues who were in Gaza currently are either missing or have not been heard from in a while. Please give us a sense of what's happening on the ground.
Thank you for having me. The situation in the West Bank is not normal. Actually, the situation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza is never normal. We've been living under 57 years of military occupation. And in Gaza, a 16-year-old illegal blockade, and that is far from normal. The situation is catastrophic. In the West Bank, we are under full lockdown imposed by Israel since Sunday. There are about 640 checkpoints across the West Bank, closing all cities, entries and exit to cities, so we cannot leave Ramallah. We can't travel between cities. We can't visit our families that live in different towns or villages or nearby towns. There have been today only 40 incidents of settler violence reported to the West Bank Protection Consortium. Today, 3 communities in the West Bank were forcibly displaced. I mean, this amounts to annexation of the West Bank. We have heard that there are WhatsApp groups where there have been calls to arm civilian settlers in the West Bank and basically shoot to kill any Palestinian they see. The messages and the text messages that have been shared across different settler outposts are frightening. I mean, we're not leaving our homes. We're not traveling on roads that we share with settlers. Because there has been already up to now over 20 killed in the West Bank since Saturday. This year has been the most devastating year for West Bank Palestinians, with the record number of fatalities of Palestinians killed by either settlers or armed forces, Israeli forces. In Gaza, I've been on calls to colleagues and my in-laws, and every single time I am trying to share this message with the world, I choke up because of imagining the situation that they're in. I'm desperately waiting for the 2 ticks on WhatsApp to appear so that I can assume that their phone is on and that they're alive. Every time I've spoken to them, they've said that the bombardments have been constant. That they've been the bloodiest, that they've been the most destructive. I've just got a notification from a colleague who is stuck in Rafah. Rafah was bombarded 2 days ago completely. He's sleeping on the street in camps, and he can't reach his family in the middle of the city in Gaza, and he's desperate to go and meet them. We have 5 colleagues that have completely lost their homes. We've asked them to share with us videos and signs of life. It's harrowing. They don't have water. They don't have electricity. There's no internet. There's no phone lines. If we are able to get through to them, it's because they are able to get some internet or some electricity somewhere to charge quickly their phones and call their loved ones and just make sure that we're okay. So right now we're focusing, of course, on locating all of our staff, but it's been a very complicated exercise to do this. As you said in your report, the hospital is threatening to shut its operations in the next couple of days, and you rightly said it is going to be a morgue, a mass cemetery. Food supplies are dwindling. Wastewater treatment plants are not operating. There's raw sewage being poured into the sea, actually Olympic pool size of raw sewage. The fear now is that this sewage is going to be basically overflow inside into the city, into Gaza.
Well, now shifting our focus from Gaza and a Palestinian perspective, let me show you and tell you what's really happening in Israel. Take a look at what's happening in Tel Aviv. Incoming rocket sirens were sounded in Tel Aviv and the surrounding suburbs, as well as the southern coastal city of Ashdod. You can hear the people starting to panic. You can hear the people running for cover with their loved ones, with their children, with all their belongings. Well, it's a harrowing situation of panic. There are no immediate reports of injuries or damage in the latest rocket barrage from the Gaza Strip so far. But even as the sirens wailed, residents sought shelter, anxiously awaiting the outcome of the attack. Repeated incidents of rocket fire, these repeated moments of panic have instilled fear, uncertainty, anxiety amongst the residents of Tel Aviv and Ashdod. But let me also show you what's happening in Ashkelon. In Ashkelon, scenes of destruction. Scenes of destruction as rockets from Gaza hit the city yet again, leaving buildings damaged and debris scattered across the streets. Additionally, in response to the escalating situation, Israel has made strategic decisions, closing the vital Ashkelon port and the oil terminal, affecting trade routes. Now, the conflict took a dire turn after a surprise attack by Hamas, resulting in widespread chaos, casualties, and kidnappings in various towns. Israel's military swiftly mobilized, launching airstrikes on key sites in Gaza and deploying substantial reinforcements. Now, the situation remains fluid at the moment, but there are concerns that are growing about the violence intensifying over the next couple of days as well, even as we're expecting a ground invasion by the Israeli Defense Forces towards North Gaza. We're also learning that that deadline that was given to all the North Gazans to move into the south part of the Gaza Strip, that deadline has been completed. It is over. It is done with, and Israel has begun pounding North Gaza. Israel's port of Ashkelon and its oil terminal have been shut in the wake of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Islamist group Hamas, declared a terrorist organization by many, and the shipping and trade sector in Ashkelon also at a halt right now. Now, Israel's military has rallied after an initial chaotic scramble to halt the assault and is retaliating with airstrikes on roads, buildings and other sites in Gaza, while sending huge reinforcements towards the enclave as well. But we've not only lost Palestinians and Israelis, non-combatants, civilians, we've also lost journalists, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look at this. At least one journalist has been killed and 6 others wounded. This in a shelling by Israeli forces in southern Lebanon, according to the witnesses at the site, of course. Now, the Reuters news agency confirmed that their own videographer, Issam Abdullah, was killed in the attack. A group of journalists, including Al Jazeera journalists, AFP journalists, and journalists from Reuters and various other Western media, were working near the Alma al-Shab, which is close to the Israel border, where the Israeli military and the Lebanese terrorist group Hezbollah have been trading fire in border clashes. Meanwhile, the Israeli army has come out and said that they are aware of the incident of the Reuters journalist being killed in that particular strike, and the Israeli Defense Forces have said that they are, quote-unquote, looking into it. Nothing more than that. That's the only statement that has come across from the Israeli Defense Forces, that they know about the incident with the Reuters journalist and that they are looking into it. Well, now safety and security, that's another aspect when we're looking at the 8th day of the Israel-Gaza war. And amid the escalating war between the Israeli army and the Hamas terrorists, a Reuters video journalist was killed and 6 other journalists were injured in southern Lebanon on Friday as well. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of reaction and furor that is coming across from the global community on the death of the Reuters journalist. Listen in to what these key voices have had to say on that.
I want to say how much this demonstrates the enormous risk of spillover of this conflict, namely in relation to Lebanon. And I want to pay tribute to the journalists that so many, unfortunately, the largest number ever last year, so many journalists are paying with their lives the work they do to bring truth to everybody in the world. That I present to their families my deepest condolence.
I mean, it's been that way forever, hasn't it? I mean, journalists are always kind of the front line. They don't really have a great defense. And, I'm also married to, my wife is Lebanese, so, Lebanon is it's another of these great sort of sad stories. Look, it's obviously, it's not just journalists, it's the whole, the whole area is just on fire, and it just is heartbreaking all the way around. And all you can do is pray that there's some version of this that comes to some peaceful end soon, and I don't see it happening in the near future. I don't think anybody does.
Extend all our deepest condolences to you and all of your colleagues at Reuters, and all of and all your family. And of course, wish a speedy recovery to all the other journalists that were injured. We understand one was severely injured. This is yet another example of the daily dangers journalists face in covering conflict throughout the world, and we do hope that there is an investigation as to exactly what happened.
The internet, I don't know the details. Usually we investigate every civilian casualties that occur, and we regret it. It is never deliberately. We always try to mitigate and avoid civilian casualties. Obviously, we would never want to hit or kill or shoot any journalist that is doing his job. But we're in a state of war. Things might happen. We regret them. We feel sorry, and we will investigate it. Right now, it's too early to call what happened there.
And another update that we're tracking for you: a breach of Israel's territory has been reported as a group of Mujahideen crosses the separation fence, the smart fence, which is east of Khan Yunis. And what we're learning is that the Mujahideen launched an attack on Israel's forces, resulting in the destruction of at least 3 military vehicles. Now, this particular gun battle, the conflict is still ongoing. This being reported by the Hamas. Now, in addition, Israel's formations near Kibbutz Nirim face bombardment with rockets and mortars as well. This is the latest that we're picking up for you, ladies and gentlemen. Mujahideen has crossed that separation fence, which is east of Khan Yunis. They've launched an attack on the Israeli forces that were stationed there, the tanks. And what we're also learning is that at least 3 military vehicles have been destroyed, even as this particular gun battle and conflict is ensuing. And Israel's formations near Kibbutz Nirim have faced bombardment with rockets and mortars. Meanwhile, international diplomacy around the Gaza-Israel war. In a statement regarding the escalating situation in Israel, President Biden expressed deep concern and sorrow over the horrifying attack that has resulted in the loss of many innocent lives, including at least 27 Americans. He also condemned the perpetrators, stating that they make even extremist groups like Al-Qaeda appear relatively restrained, characterizing them as pure evil.
I also want to say a word about the situation in Israel. The more we learn about the attack, the more horrifying it becomes. More than 1,000 innocent lives lost, including at least 27 Americans. These guys make Al-Qaeda look pure. They're pure evil. As I said from the beginning, the United States, make no mistake about it, stands with Israel. The United States stands with Israel. Secretary of State Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and Secretary of Defense Austin is there today. We're making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself and respond to these attacks. It's also a priority for me to urgently address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke with the family members of all those Americans who are still unaccounted for on a Zoom call for about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families. We're working round the clock to secure the release of Americans held by Hamas in close cooperation with Israel and our partners around the region. We're not going to stop till we bring them home.
Well, now that's not all. Even as he vows complete support to Israel, let me tell you that the USS's Gerald R. Ford and several other vessels carrying those F-16s, F-35s, the A-10s, they're all already on their way to the Mediterranean, from the East Mediterranean, acting as a deterrent. A cargo had also landed in Israel a couple of days back from the United States, which had the right kind of ammunition and military power and prowess as well. But just to give you a sense of what the USS's Gerald R. Ford, the USA's Navy, the USS Normandy, the USS Hunter, all of that, the entire fleet, the frigate, has been deployed towards Israel just to act as a deterrent for no other partaker or party to come into this conflict and really escalating the entire war. Meanwhile, amid the war between Israel and the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas, India has been bringing our citizens back home, repatriating them with their loved ones here, and another batch of stranded Indians, 235 of them, were brought back to India today as part of the country's ongoing repatriation mission, Operation Ajay. Now, the special chartered flight with the second batch of 235 Indian nationals, including 2 infants, took off from the Ben Gurion airport on Friday at 11:02 p.m. local time in the night. Meanwhile, visuals coming across from the cabin where all the Indian citizens can be heard chanting Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram! 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 Vande Mataram!
Basically relieved because all the flights were cancelled. Like we booked one Air India flight and then another Emirates, both were cancelled. So we are basically trapped, and definitely only this evacuation process was the only option, and we are relieved from that situation, you know, because we at least I never seen this type of situation in my life. So Israeli people are very familiar. It is nothing for them, but for us, we were afraid. And I am pregnant, so I cannot run to the shelter. We know that if we go to the shelter, nothing will happen. But if I can't go to the shelter, then there is a risk. So particularly in my case, definitely it is a big relief. And the way they handled, the way they give priority to all of us, they communicated very well. And really, it's a very good initiative. And thank to we really, from the bottom of our heart, we really thank the government of India.
It was very helpful. We were in the very critical situation. Yeah. We were helpless at the time, so it is helping a lot for the people who struggled in the war.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we've come to an end of this particular episode. Even as we're trying to really decode what's happening inside Gaza, and we're getting those visuals from across various, coastal skylines from where you can see the Gaza Strip, be it Ashdod, be it Escalating, be it Sderot. We can see smoke billowing because that deadline has passed and the thumping and the pounding of the Gaza Strip has begun. But what really happens to all those children, to all those women, to all those infants that are currently inside Gaza? Millions that have had to forcefully evacuate their homes from northern part of Gaza, move to south part of Gaza, and that south border, the Rafah border with Egypt, that's also not open. So what's really going to happen in this humanitarian crisis? For what many people are divided on right now, even as the international community is divided over pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli rallies and protests, the real question is, what is a war crime and what is evil terror? And are we looking at the two fighting it out over here? You can count on News 9 to bring you all the latest developments and details. This rolling coverage of the Israel-Gaza war is not going to end over here. This is Kabir Naqvi signing off. Lots more coming right on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हैं क्योंकि सभी लोग कर रहे हैं.
Coaching is now starting from grade 3, 4, 5, 6.
होता जाने वाली बीच राह में आधे टेस्ट देके हैं सिलेक्शन की चाह में.
ऑल इंडिया का बच्चा कोटा जाता है.
This rat race is for rats, not for humans. So why should we even be a part of it?
The Rat Race. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.